Well, hello and welcome to this week's A Photographic Life. Over the last couple of weeks, I think also, actually, to be honest with you, all of the time, I'm constantly reminded or thinking about photographers who I used to put a lot of store by, who influenced my work, my thinking, who I commissioned, who I don't hear about anymore. And I think that's one of the things with photography. You can have a moment in the spotlight and then disappear. Or you can have a long career where you're never really ever in the spotlight, but you just keep going. Well, one of the photographers who I have to say I was always a big fan of, whom I met and who I commissioned, was Alistair Thane. Now, you may or may not be aware of Alistair Thane's work. If you're not, I'm going to give you a few facts. It's really hard to find anything out about Alistair. There is a Wikipedia page, but it doesn't give a lot of information. And there is no website. But I think what it shows is the importance as photographers that we've either got to keep on top of all of those things and make sure that everybody knows that we're still around making work, or alternatively, we sort of disappear. And for me, Alistair has kind of disappeared. So if you're out there, Alistair, or if you're a friend of Alistair's, do please get in touch. But here are the facts I found out. So, Alistair Thane, born 1961, is a German-born photographer. His portraits were published in 1991 in the book Skin Deep. Now, that is a hugely influential book of the time. But again, I think largely forgotten. Anyway, many of his images are held in the collection of the National Portrait Gallery, London. With Tom Stoddart, the photographer, he made work about the siege of Sarajevo, which was exhibited at the Royal Festival Hall in London and published as a book. Thane was born in Dusseldorf, Germany, and studied at the London College of Printing. His imaginative and often subversive portraits soon began to appear internationally in publications such as Vogue, the New York Times, Vanity Fair and The Face, and on record sleeves in particular. In a 2012 article, Thane's, shall we say, interesting approach to cameras was revealed and talked about. Says this: Thane is internationally renowned professional photographer based in London, UK. His cameras are intended for extremely detailed photographs, producing high-quality images. The camera here in the photograph in the article is called the Wedding Cake, which uses 9.5-inch wide film loaded into a standard aerial camera film holder, which has a format of 9 by 9 inches. The feature that really stands out is the enormous lens, with its high-resolution Zeiss Jena Lamagon 90mm f5.6, providing Thane a distortion-free 122-degree angle. This lens was actually intended for the use by military applications made in former East Germany and is incredibly expensive. Evidently, Thane's camera, the lens, is the last one ever made. Thane has invested more than a decade of his life to learn the limitations and possibilities of building his very specialist cameras. You might think this isn't homemade, as he has used expert engineers to construct them, but he comes from a very non-technical background and he has managed to construct 2 different cameras into individual masterpieces. So, great photographer, a bit of an enigma. Alistair, are you out there? Another photographer who always remains in the back of my mind as a huge inspiration is the American photographer Matt Mahurin, or now known, I should say, as Matthew S. Mahurin, and that's Mahurin. I found out a little bit of information about Matt. He kind of disappeared as far as I was concerned for a long time, but really interesting to catch back up with his work. So I'm going to suggest you do too. I first came across his work in the late 1980s when, to my eyes, he was a Rolling Stone photographer, creating incredibly original, soft, almost illustrative portraits of people such as Tom Waits and Van Morrison. They're the two that really stick in my mind. Anyway, Matt Mahurin, born January in 1959, is an American illustrator, photographer, and film director, I should say. His illustrations appear in Time, Newsweek, Mother Jones, Rolling Stone, Esquire, Forbes, and the New York Times. And his work as a photo essayist has dealt with subjects such as homelessness, people with AIDS, the Texas prison system, abortion clinics, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Belfast. His extensive work directing music videos since 1986 has resulted in him working with U2. I'm not a fan of U2. Maybe that was a Freudian slip. Metallica, Dreams So Real, Tracy Chapman, Tom Waits, R.E.M., Alice in Chains, Def Leppard, and a million others. So there's another photographer I'm going to put your way who's always been important to me, but doesn't seem to get spoken about very much anymore. Matt Mahurin. You can find his work at mattmahurin.com. Whilst we're talking about photographers who are true originals, guess what's creeping around the corner? Yes, it's AI. A few things I've seen recently that I thought were worth discussing. One was a post on social media by a photographer. It said, I'm all for innovation. My 20-plus year career is built on adapting to new tools, but lighting, intent, and taste aren't techniques to make AI look real. They are the craft of photography. Those skills come from years on set, real problem solving, and working with real people in real environments. That shouldn't be reduced to training data. Tech should support creatives, not quietly replace them. Big miss from @ProPhoto, not cool. Well, I completely agree with the comments being made there by the poster. Unfortunately, I didn't keep a record of who they were, but they were responding to another post. Looks like it may have been on Threads, maybe on Facebook actually, and it was by the lighting company ProPhoto, who was saying this: only those who understand light can make AI-generated images feel real. For photographer @Inez Thompson, lighting, direction, contrast, and intent define how AI interprets and extends an image. When the light is intentional, results feel believable. When it isn't, the illusion breaks. 3 things to keep in mind. Light direction defines realism. Contrast keeps images believable. Intent shapes the mood. Do you want to know all Inez tips and tricks? A link in bio. Well, I have to say, it's not that simple, is it? Remaining in the world of AI, whatever that world may be, I heard the other day about a novelist whose book was being taken off of the shelves, taken off sale by the huge French publisher Hachette, because it was believed by the readers, strangely enough, that the book had been created using AI. It was within the science fiction genre, which evidently is very open to that kind of idea. It's a genre which lends itself, I suppose, obviously to AI. The person who'd written the book, the novelist, came out and said, well, I think maybe my editor may have used AI tools to improve some areas. I have to say, a rather weak explanation or excuse. But it also linked up with something I saw, another news article concerning a British photographer called Robert Wilson. And this is what was said. British photographer Robert Wilson created the conceptual shoot of a number of celebrities for Radio Times magazine about a TV show called Last One Laughing. If you've seen it, it's very funny, very good. I recommend it. In which UK comedians make each other laugh while trying to keep a straight face. Wilson produced 12 individual Radio Times covers for the week's edition and made a looping video from his high-res photos, which showed the comedians as they're trying not to laugh. Immediately, the work was described by those who saw it as being AI and therefore fake. Robert Wilson came out and said, absolutely not. They are not fake images, and they were all created by me in camera. Well, here's a problem, and it's a problem I see, and I'm sure you see also with a lot of imagery, photography, that is created to promote television programs at the moment. They are so highly retouched. The post-production is so extreme that they do not look like photographs. They do look like illustrations, perhaps like the old school paintings that used to accompany cinema releases back in the 1940s and 50s, idealized versions of the celebrities, the actual people who are in the shows. There is no shortage of examples of this, and any new Netflix or Prime video or anything that comes on any channel seems to come with these composite images. Now, I think the problem here for the novelist writing the sci-fi and for the photographer creating the images is if you are using tools which instantly give a feeling of unreality, of fakeness, of illustration, then you cannot be surprised if people start to believe that what you're doing is AI and that you've slipped over that boundary between believability and imagination. So I think there is a tale for all of us to think about when we're looking at this kind of work. What actually is our intention? Is our intention to show reality or not? And if we use tools which take our images away from reality, then we've failed. A photographer who brings together all of the themes of this week's episode is another photographer that you may not know the name of. However, there is perhaps an argument to say that he is the most influential photographer in the world today. And his name is Frank W. Okenfels III. Now, I first came across Frank in the late 80s, early 90s, and we worked together on a number of portraits. And I always found Frank to be an original thinker, a true artist, in that he always saw his photography as connecting to something more than making an image of what he can see. But let me just tell you about Frank, and then let me explain as to why he connects together all of the themes. Well, I suppose the first one, of course, is that you may not be aware of him. Frank isn't somebody who does a lot of talks or podcasts or anything else. In fact, I've been trying to get Frank onto the podcast for a number of years. Not yet successful, but anyway. So Frank's an American photographer, artist and director who's best known for his portraits of prominent celebrities like David Bowie, Angelina Jolie, David Lynch, Alicia Keys, Kurt Cobain. Frank has photographed pretty much everybody. He's also made music videos for artists such as Alice in Chains, Everclear, and covers for albums such as Bruce Springsteen, Sting, Willie Nelson, Wilco, Queen Latifah, Tom Waits. There's a very similar connection there with the Matt Mahurin. He's also, and this is the area which I think brings everything together, responsible for more film posters than you can shake a bag of popcorn at, as well as TV shows. And that's everything from Breaking Bad to House of Cards to Harry Potter to the Pirates of the Caribbean to Interview with the Vampire. I mean, literally, there isn't a film, I don't think, that Frank wasn't behind the photography for the film poster. And that is where his influence comes from, I think. He's the photographer whose work, whose images you probably know better than any other, but you don't know his name. Now, the other great thing about Frank, and this is what ties in with what we were just discussing there about the Radio Times photographer, the English photographer, is that on his website, which is FWO3, the numeral, .com, Frank not only puts up all of the posters as they looked after the post-production had been done, he also puts up the photographs he took in the studio against a flat background before the work was done on them. With Frank, there's an incredible honesty there. You're getting to see behind the magic. You're starting to see there how these images are manipulated and turned into something else. So Frank's being very open and honest. He's admitting that the images he creates are being turned into something else. His involvement in that today, I'm not sure. I've spoken to him about it in the past, and it really was a case of making the images and then just handing them over. I'm not sure if that's still the case today. It may well be. But as well as those images that are post-produced, what you will see is that Frank also makes images to promote the film, which are true to his photographic spirit and energy. So Frank Oakenfels III, a bit like Ralph Eugene Meatyard from the other week, is another photographer with a great name that you may not have heard of. So I highly recommend checking Frank out, checking Matt Mahurin out. Also, and of course, Alistair Thane. All three are welcome to come on the podcast. Of course, I'd love to catch up with all three of them and have a conversation. Maybe that'll happen and maybe that won't. What I do want to thank all of you for is listening to the podcast. I'm hearing an awful lot of people on podcasts and YouTube channels and so forth promoting heavily, like and subscribe. If you could, that would be great. I'm not the kind of person who's going to be pushy about that, but it does help us with the algorithm, and therefore it does help the conversation to get out to more and more people. This podcast has just grown to such an extent now. It never ceases to amaze me where you're listening to each episode from across the world and all the things you're doing. So do please keep getting in touch. Tell me where you're listening. Give me your thoughts on what we talk about and the conversations. Don't forget also at UnitedNationsOfPhotography.com, I write approximately 2 to 3 short articles a week, which are reflections on things I see or things I think, which you might also find useful and you can also respond to. Everything we do is for free. There is no charge for anything. Also, if you're on Substack, you can follow UN of Photo on Substack, where I'll put links to all the different things that we're doing. And of course, you can follow us through our YouTube channel as well, which is also at UN of Photo. Anyway, that's about it for this week. That's your homework. You've got your homework for the next week. You've got to find out about some photographers. And in the meantime, of course, we've all in this troubled world got to take care.